Hey, what's up, everybody? Lawler here with another Q&A Sunday. I think we're on the 16th one. Either way, you guys are absolutely crushing it. Two things before we get into the questions for today's video. Number one, next week Sunday, I turn old. Next week Sunday, I'm turning 30. And if there is something you guys would like me to do special for the 30th Q&A, or the 30th birthday Q&A edition, or whatever the heck I'm going to call it, let me know in the comments down below. And the second thing, as always, if you guys want to make sure your questions are getting answered, or if you have questions that you'd like to ask, drop those in the comments down below. With that said, let's get straight into the video. What's up, everybody? Lawler here, inside source for all things Rocket League. We got a Q&A Sunday, number 16. A lot of fun things to talk about between roster changes, being a disadvantage or not, EU performances, things with Bakkesmod, and a whole bunch more. Before we get into it, obviously, as always, thumbs up, subscribe, notifications. With that said, let's get into it. First one comes from Keen that says, "Hey, Lawler, absolutely loving Q&A videos." Thank you, sir. The question is, if you could you explain some more signals casters like to use? Absolutely love knowing that kind of stuff and then seeing people use it while I'm watching. A lot of the times with casters, when they're on broadcast together and nearby, everybody has their own kind of different cues. The big one I was talking about last week is if I have something to say, I'll like tap my finger on the desk. That way the person can see it out of their peripheral. Like, yo, he has something to say. Let me pass it off. The longer you cast with someone, the more it turns and transitions into nonverbal communication. The biggest one and ones that I can kind of point out for are like if we're on the desk or like analyst desk or doing something to that regard, when someone has something they want to say and they need to jump in and they need to communicate that to everybody else on the desk, when someone is getting in their point, they'll be like, yep, yep, and they'll verbally confirm that I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, that's also telling everybody else, hey, I need to speak next. I got something I need to say. The other things that you'll notice if you do, people will directly address. Usually the host will directly say that person's name and look directly at them. So there's certain little things here and there, different nuances. If that's stuff you would like me to point out, come over to the stream, twitch.tv/Lawler, every day but Tuesday and Sunday. And if we do watch parties and stuff, I'll try to point that stuff out for y'all. Next question says, love the content on Twitch and YouTube. Appreciate it. Do teams like SSG and Energy who stay the same going into next season have a major advantage or not? Will this be an advantage going into LANs? That's a two-part question for sure. The first part about teams staying together having an advantage. Overall, usually teams that stick together longer, I do feel have an advantage. The benefit being is there's a little bit more familiarity. There's a little bit more chemistry. There's a lot of things between the two teams that are really beneficial in regards to just knowing each of your teammates' tendencies or idiosyncrasies, which is actually my favorite word in the English language. But knowing those small little different nuances about your teammates does allow and does propel you to kind of that next level of being like, oh yeah, this player always does this thing. I'm going to position in a way because I know it's going to happen. Or the way we communicate or certain things that take time to develop. Teams that stay together usually have a benefit to that. Now, most changes when they do happen is because the team is underperforming. And when you come in with a new team, there is going to be playstyle differences. The team that, you know, these OGs of like Energy and Space Station, if they are staying together, may not necessarily be used to. There may be a new team that comes in, like FaZe next season is going to look totally different than what FaZe did in the past. And that will be a little bit weird. But obviously Space Station Energy being towards the top, most likely will be unfazed by that situation. So depending on how it is, it may look weird at first, but as they start playing and practicing, then both teams are going to have to adapt and try to figure out whose skill ceiling is better or who plays better on the day. So overall, yes, teams that stay together for longer have an advantage. And as for LAN is an interesting one because we haven't had one in so long. I don't know if the veteran experience is going to outweigh. I'm sure there's going to be a level of familiarity for the OGs, the guys that have been there a bunch of times, where they'll kind of settle in faster. But because it's been such a huge gap, like we haven't had a LAN since December of 2019, it's going to be a little bit weird for everybody going back to LAN, but anybody who has veteran talent that's been there, done that, is definitely going to have an advantage on LAN. Next question comes from Chris that says, last video you were talking about NA would be clapping EU except for Vitality. Do you think the reason for this is that EU is a region full of players that barely have any experience and in general easier for players to reach top of RLCS? In NA, I feel like there have been more or less the same players at the top for a long time. Yeah, I said that pretty boldly in my last video, and I still stand by it. If you look historically at the last few RLCS seasons, it has been most of the North American teams on the top with a sprinkle of NA or EU, like a Dignitas or a Vitality. I firmly believe that if we would have had LAN for Season 10, it would have been more of the same. A lot of North American teams towards the top, with maybe Vitality putting up a really good fight towards the tail end of the bracket. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I just look at based upon the play style and everything else. And another key factor, Europe's kind of lazy. Unfortunately, from everybody I talk to and everybody other than the select few that are kind of the outliers to that, EU doesn't really scrim as hard. They don't practice as hard. There's a lot of playtime that just doesn't happen as much towards the top end. And it kind of shows in the results. You have teams like BDS and Vitality that stay at the top the entire time, but then you get some random bubble team that comes up and plays upset over and over again. And that just doesn't happen in North America. And a lot of that is due to the structure and the foundation that's created with the way they do scrims and practices. Playstyle wise, obviously you can look at stats and everything else, but at the end of the day, when you have the eye test, like I've casted and watched Rocket League for tens of thousands of hours, ultimately there's things that you can see based upon playstyle and the way that they rotate and stuff where it, if you're playing in North America, will not fly. I will say though, European playstyle usually translates onto LAN a little bit better because they're less reliant on mechanics. It's more about positional passing and stuff like that. So it's more of like a foundation that is created rather than having to rely on, you know, first killer popping off, which on LAN is less likely to happen because it is a newer setup. It's an unfamiliar territory. There's chances of, you know, nerves and stuff as compared to being at home and having that level of comfort. So Europe to me usually does play a little bit better at LAN, but as of late, it seems like all these young kids coming in just don't know what consequences. They don't really feel the pressure. They don't understand the gravity of how important it is what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with LAN. I think it's busted wide open. I think it's pretty much anybody's for the taking, but I still will look at teams like Energy and stuff that have a ton of experience on LAN and have 3 players that are historically god tier at LAN. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out. But ultimately, yeah, I do believe North America would beat Europe primarily for the fact of just work ethic. It's kind of weird to say, but that's honestly what it comes down to. Next question comes from Pilot Jack that says, how do you think BDS and Vitality will perform in the regional events for Season 11? Will BDS be dominant again like they were in Season 10, or will they be given more pressure from Vitality, such as the EU Championship Finals? This is a prime example of what I'm talking about. Vitality looked pretty lackluster throughout the season and wasn't this god tier team like we wanted. And what BDS did is unheard of. It's something that I don't think will ever be recreated and is really depressing to think about, knowing that they had such a good season. We don't even get to see it live to the full potential of a LAN. It's something that I don't think will ever be recreated, which is really unfortunate. And it kind of carries back to my last answer, where I do think it was pretty much Vitality and BDS at the top. Every once in a while, you get a different team like Top Blokes or, you know, Queso or whoever it was. Giants obviously did really well in the first split, but I don't know if we're ever going to see that recreation of what BDS accomplished. It's unheard of. And when the guys that have been doing it for a long time don't have a reason to play, obviously it's their job and their career and stuff on the line, but at the end of the day, they're trying to lift a trophy. They want to go to the World Championship and play where it all matters. And not being able to do that, and that's taken away again for the second season in a row, is really disheartening. It's really demotivating, and it's frustrating for those players, and they choose not to play as much. I do not know if we're going to see more of the same. I can tell you, based upon the rosters and stuff, as things are starting to finalize over in Europe, there I can say confidently is like 5 or 6 teams that will be extremely competitive towards the top, similar to how it is in North America. Where in North America, you have your dedicated 5 or 6 teams that almost every single time are in the top 8, with a couple that interchange between 7 and 8. Europe was pretty much, we had a top 2, top 3, and then towards the tail end, you saw a couple teams that were a bit more motivated, like Guild, come in and overtake. But you saw exactly what happens when Vitality's like, oh, we got something to play for. We're going to make sure everybody knows how good we are. And they made BDS look silly. So again, it depends on what that motivator is and what the reasoning is for them to go and grind. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see another BDS-like performance. I don't think we're ever going to see a team that dominant ever again, which is unfortunate because it was a special thing. And they don't get to cap it off with a World Championship appearance. But yes, significant pressure will be applied to some of these other teams. You look at Carmine Corp and Top Blokes with Shawzette, and you look at a bunch of these other teams. There's going to be some really talented rosters in Europe, and I'm excited to see how it plays out, and hopefully provides some consistency towards the top, which is just better for the scene overall. Up next, we've got, hey Lawler, do you think it'd be a good idea if Psyonix implemented Bakkesmod features such as first person? Yeah, I don't even need to read this whole thing. 100% yes. Bakkesmod, obviously, if you guys don't know, is a PC mod that allows us to do custom training packs and unique things to the game. It also allows you to do item swapping and all that kind of stuff. Trainer options, and there's a lot of cool features to Bakkesmod. It's how we also play the modded maps and the custom maps. The thing with Bakkesmod is it is a mod. It's a third-party software, and there's also things in there like the ability to swap your items in game, which basically makes the trade system and the blueprints useless. which Psyonix obviously will not want. I'm actually personally surprised that Psyonix hasn't talked to Bakkesmod and said, hey, we want to buy the rights to this program. We want to own Bakkesmod and find a way to implement it into game, because it does provide a lot of features that are very useful. The difficulty with that is if they do that, they have to find a way to also get that stuff over on the other platforms, whether it be console, Switch, you name it. And that's not always the easiest thing to do with updates. So if I was Psyonix, that's probably one of the first things I would do, is I would either hire the team at Bakkesmod, or I would go to Bakkesmod and say, hey, we love what you're doing. We want to buy the rights and the IP to this, and we want to implement it into our game. Help us with that. We'll pay you well. And then we're going to clean slate. We're going to remove the ability to change to whatever item you want. That completely goes against everything that we're doing for our monetary platform. But it is something that I think that they should implement. It does sound like Psyonix has a lot of big things coming, and they haven't really hinted at what those are. I'm desperately hoping that it is a new engine, Unreal Engine 5, and a lot of custom features like this, custom game modes, better trainers, map packs, all that kind of stuff. So fingers crossed. But yeah, 100%. Bakkesmod features in Rocket League would be amazing if they were just part of the game rather than having to use a third-party program on PC. Last but not least, in the previous Q&A video, you mentioned that you were into the metal scene. You bet. I actually used to be a vocalist for a band. We sucked, hence not doing it anymore. Have you ever been to a concert? And if so, who have you been to? That is an impossible question. I've been going to concerts since I was about 13, 14. The first one I went to was a band. No, the first one I went to was a tour called Sounds of the Underground back in like 2015, 2016. Had like 20 some headliner bands, all crazy, and it was like 20 some bucks to get a ticket, and just nonstop top tier bands that could all headline their own concert and their own tours. I've seen probably a good 300-400 bands live, and that ranges all over the place. Primarily in the metal scene though, I like heavy stuff like deathcore and death metal, stuff like Dired is Murder, Fit for an Autopsy, stuff like that. Shout outs to Joe, who's the vocalist. He's a good buddy. Tommy over at Chelsea Grin. But yeah, I've been very lucky to meet some really cool people in the metal scene and got to go and see shows and concerts and all that kind of stuff. Recently, I went and saw Funcase, which is dubstep. But yeah, I've seen over probably a good 200-300 bands of metal alone, maybe more, maybe less. But yeah, that's pretty much how I spent all my days when I was a kid. If I had time off and there was a weekend and a concert, I'd drive down to Milwaukee and go to the rave, or I go to Madison. I forget the venue down there. It was hot. It was basically in a pit, and like it was all the hot, sweaty people. It just like surrounded us. It was terrible. You couldn't breathe. Going to St. Paul quite a bit at the Loft, where I went and saw Funcase recently. But yeah, a lot of concerts and stuff all throughout the Midwest, West Bend in that area. But yeah, I used to go to concerts quite a bit, but as I get older now, I just much rather sit backstage, you know, drink a beer and talk and hang out and enjoy the music, rather than being in the pit and, you know, doing circle pits and wall of deaths and all that kind of stuff, which I've done plenty of. And now I'm just getting too old for it. So yeah, plenty of concerts, plenty of bands. If you ever want to know specifics or talk that stuff, stop by the stream. Stream every day, Tuesday but Sunday. Come hang out. That's going to wrap it up for this video of Q&A Sunday. As a reminder, next week Sunday is my 30th birthday. If there's certain questions or things you would like me to answer during that video, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you do enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.